Today, what I'm going to do is show you a coat that at first glance kind of looks like the coat length is too short for the dog, and perhaps the chest circumference is too tight. But there's actually something really surprising that's going on here behind the fit issue that many people overlook. Let's take a look at the actual problem. So this is a picture of my dog Scout in a coat that clearly is too small for her. But what I wanted to first show you, you can see that the coat length is too short for her. That's the first thing that I wanted to show you. It's fairly obvious that the coat length is too short. But what's also going on here is you can see all these little wrinkles. See how these wrinkles are forming? This coat is not actually wrinkled. It just looks like it is because there's a lot of tension that's going on around this area here. But you can't really tell that from the top view. It just looks to me from this top view that the coat is clearly just too short. It's not covering her back. But when we look at the side view, you can still see how all these wrinkles are happening up here. But you can also see that the chest circumference is clearly too small for her. But it fits her okay here. This is the chest width area if you were following my measurements. And it also kind of fits her okay around the neck circumference. So clearly there are parts of this coat that fit Scout, but not all of them. And then if we go to this next shot here, I'm pointing to the point on the coat where the withers are. So the withers comes up from right behind this point here, and it should go straight up. This is where the withers are on the coat, but where the withers are on Scout are right up behind her front legs, where the highest point on her back spine is, where her shoulders are, and they're right about here. So we can see that the withers position is off. Now this is where I typically will tell people to start looking at their measurements, because the withers, if the withers is off, it's going to make such a big difference on how the coat fits. What's also happening here is that it's way too tight in behind her front legs. Now again, this could be caused by the withers position. If that withers position, as you can see here, it's pulling everything forward. The coat is being pulled forward because of that withers position. But that withers position also dictates where the belly section of the coat happens. And that belly section is supposed to happen behind the front legs. So what happens when that withers is off is that it's too tight here. Everything so far kind of looks like, well, maybe it's just a withers issue, or perhaps it's a chest girth or chest circumference issue. But what I want to show you is that it's actually about the front height situation. If I look at the chest circumference on this, now this is, the chest circumference is basically measured from the widest point on the coat. So if I look at the chest circumference on this, well, it's 12 inches on this coat here. Now I'm going to show you the coat that actually fits Scout. This is her coat, and look at the difference. So if we look at the difference here between the widest point on the coat down, it's actually only 13 inches. So that's actually not a big difference. Between 12 and 13 inches, if we did that double, because that would be the full circumference would be doubled that, we'd be looking at 24 inches compared to 26 inches. But that doesn't explain enough of the problem for why that whole coat was shifting up and riding up on the body. So what's actually going on is the front height. The front height on the dog is measured between the front legs. So you take your measuring tape, your soft measuring tape, and you measure from the collar, where the collar would normally sit, and you run down the front chest on the dog to the widest point on their chest. So if we look at that measurement on a dog coat, so the front height on that, I would take from, this is where it sits underneath the dog's head. So this is where the collar was that I just showed you. And this would go through the front legs to the widest point on the dog's chest. And we get a measurement of 16. But the coat that actually fits Scout If we do the same thing on this coat, this front height measurement, if I take that measurement from here, where this is where it sits at her collar, and run through the front legs to the widest point on her chest, it's actually 20 inches. So there's a 4-inch difference there. That's that much of a difference from how that dog coat fits her. So what's going on is that this point that's wrapping in behind her front legs is pulling way too far forward. And that makes the whole coat want to shift forward. And that shifting forward is what caused all those wrinkles that we saw across the top back on the dog coat. And also it's causing that withers position to shift forward. Everything's shifting forward. But because you've got this wrap that's going in behind the front legs on the dog, this is where the front legs would sit on a dog, because you've got this point that's actually in behind those front legs, that's also pulling up. So when that pulls up, that's going to start causing chafing and rubbing underneath the armpits on the dog, and that's going to be really uncomfortable for them. So this front height is a really critical measurement, particularly if you're working with dogs that have a very deep chest, or what's called a deep brisket. So the brisket is measured on a dog from the top of that withers point to the bottom of the deepest point on their chest. And that actually is very deep on a dog with such a dog like a Doberman Pinscher, or a Whippet, or a Portuguese water dog, or a poodle. Now Scout is a combination. She's a cross between a Portuguese water dog and a poodle. So she's got one of these really deep, deep chests. And if I bring back this other coat here, just to compare it, this one has a deep chest, but it doesn't have a very long front. This coat is actually designed for a bulldog or a French bulldog that has a very deep chest and a very wide circumference around the neck circumference, but they actually have quite small little front legs, and the point that wraps down around here is not quite as deep. That brisket depth that I talked about isn't quite as deep on one of these dogs as it is for, let's say, Scout. So this brisket depth is quite important. And the key measurement that I want to talk about, or I want you to think about, is this front height. I'm just going to open this dog coat up and just show you on the flat, sort of the flat look of it. So I'll just open this out. This is my slicker coat, by the way, if you're wondering what coat we're looking at here. This is the slicker. It's a great coat. You can either do it, this particular coat is done with a a cotton blend for the inside, for the lining and for the chest area. And then the outside is done in a waterproof fabric. This particular coat over here that we've done for Scout, this is actually done in a waterproof cloth, and the outside is waterproof. And this is a thicker, more of a fleece blend. The underside of this is actually fleece, so it's a warmer coat. Now, this particular coat here, let's do it this way so you can see a little bit more. I wanted to just show you that front height on the flat side, because that's going to make a little bit more sense when we look at the pattern. So as we showed you on that other example, when I ran this Taylor's measuring tape through around that front height, it's 16 inches from this point, which is where it sits at the collar, to where it meets at the widest point on the dog's chest underneath those front legs. That's 16 inches here. And again, if we look at the same thing on this coat, so this point here where the gray is where that meets the collar, or where the collar starts. The measure of that is 20 inches. So again, there's that 4-inch difference in how long that front height is, and that makes all the difference for how that wraps around the front legs. So what I'd like to now show you just quickly is how I would go about fixing this on the pattern itself. So this is the pattern for the slicker. This is the back portion, and we're just going to leave this. This, you know, as we said earlier, the back length was clearly wrong on that. That's a really simple fix. You just slice it there along that length and shorten line, and you just extend that back length out. But where we're going to make the adjustment for this is on that chest section, that front height section. So for my slicker coat, this comes in two parts. So this part here is made out of a stretch fabric, a stretch lining. I usually do the lining and this chest circumference, the chest cover area in the same fabric, and I usually do that in a stretch fabric. So this portion here is this portion here. And this point here is what attaches to the back, and that's this portion here. And then this part down here, which is what runs through the front legs and then wraps along the side of the dog, is this portion here of the pattern. So if I was going to change that front height on the coat, I would be looking at these two actually attached to each other when you sew it together. So I would put those together, and I would be changing this distance. I would be going from that collar point down to where the widest point on the girth on the dog is, the chest circumference. I would extend that. This pattern obviously is not the same one as this one, but it's a nice small pattern. And I just wanted to show you that's where I would change that. So I would increase that length. And then if I wanted to change where the portion is that runs around the chest circumference, because that was a little tight on her. As we said, the difference between the smaller jacket and the larger jacket that actually fits her is 2 inches difference in the full circumference, or 1 inch difference in the half, which is what we look at when we're talking about the pattern, because it's cut on the fold. So there's 1 inch difference here. So I would extend this. I would make a cut along the pattern here, and I would pull this section out so it's a little bit longer, and then I would have a little bit more distance here to cover her full chest circumference. One more thing I want to just point out here before I move on is this area here is this area here. So this is where it wraps around the dog's front legs. This point here, remember before I talked about that brisket depth. So the brisket depth you take a flat kind of object like a flat ruler or something, and you put that on the dog's shoulders, the highest point right up there on the highest point of their shoulders. And then you can take your hand or something else and find that lowest point on their belly. So that's down here. And that point there, from here all the way down to there, is their brisket depth. So that point there is this point here on the pattern. So that is right about here on the coat itself. And so we would have to bring in this other piece, the back piece, to get that full picture. This is where the coat wraps around here. Just pull that out of the way for now. So this point here, if we were looking at this point here of the coat, that's the same as this shape here. So that matches that part of the pattern. This point here is this point that wraps around. So if I'm looking at that brisket depth, this is the point that I'm measuring from here, which is the lowest point of the chest, the deepest point of that chest on the dog right here. And then this point up here is where the withers are on the dog, which is this point here. So that point there really does determine this point where the leg opening is. So that's, see this too, this is where the leg opening is. So that is really critical too when you're looking at that particular chest brisket depth, the chest depth. Anyways, if you're interested in looking into this a lot deeper and how you would actually go about changing this pattern and editing it so that it actually fits your dog, let me know in the comments down below, and I can start to develop a little bit more detail on how I would go through that. But this is a really good overview of what I would do with this particular pattern and how that front height really is quite critical in the in the measuring process. Instead of just looking at that obvious, what was the back length issue, if we go to the photos again, instead of looking at that, what we thought was obvious, the back length was obviously a problem, instead of just starting there and going, okay, clearly I just need to make it longer, you then kind of look at where that chest circumference is and how that's a problem. And then you look at, well, okay, where are the withers on the dog? So then you look at that and how that might change on your pattern. And then ultimately, you're going to start looking at those other issues. So that chest, that brisket depth and the chest circumference. And then this is the side-by-side comparison when we're looking at that front height. So that front height here was 16 inches. And the front height on the blue coat here is 20 inches. You can't see it because the ruler's even too short to measure it. But that is where the critical problem exists on these two coats, is that front height. And again, when we have that front height is wrong, you can see that it's really pushing and like pinching in behind Scout's front legs here. And you can see by these wrinkles, all of these wrinkles, how the whole coat is just shifting forward. You can see by the angle of those wrinkles that it's just pulling, everything's being pulled forward. So the front height is such a critical point to look at when you're measuring these things. And again, if you haven't done so before, I have a full measuring process that walks you through how to measure your dog in all these different areas so that you can measure your dog and then look at the patterns and figure out how you need to alter your pattern so that it actually fits your dog. So as I said, if this is something that is interesting to you and you want to look into this a little bit deeper about how I would actually go about changing the pattern itself in order to fix this, just do let me know in the pattern in the comments down below. Those comments are really helpful to me because it really just shows me where the real issues are that you guys are dealing with, and it gives me some real content that I can show you. A couple of weeks ago, a woman sent me some, actually emailed me some photographs of her dog coat on her dog. And I looked at them and I couldn't see all of the areas of problems, but I could say right away, it just looked to me like there was one issue that I thought she could look at. And she very kindly responded this week to say that she looked at that measurement that I suggested and she created a new pattern and it fits perfectly. So she's really happy. And what's so wonderful about this is that if you can catch these kind of mistakes or these measurement issues before you actually get to the point of sewing, your frustration level is so much less because you're not tearing out stitches or throwing out your whole thing that you've spent hours and hours making. You're actually able to figure out those fit issues before you even get to the fabric. And what I'm always suggesting to people too is once you've created your pattern and you've added those adjustments in so that you've got the right back length, you've got the right chest circumference, the right front height, all of those things, tape that pattern together and then just drape it over your dog and just see how it fits them. Because again, this is such an easy point to say, oh, I can see there's a real issue here. Yeah, the paper pattern is not going to fold and drape the way fabric does, but it's going to give you a really quick idea of where the problems might exist before you get to the point of cutting your fabric or even as far as sewing out that whole garment. So if you guys have any questions at all that you want to talk about, please do put the comments down below, or I always put my email in the description. And so I would love for you to email me your problems that you're having with your dog fit issues and send me some photos of those right so that you can show me exactly where those issues are, and then I can bring it up into a YouTube live and talk about it. This is the thing, like when you look at measuring charts, when you buy a pattern or when you go out and buy a piece of clothing in a dog store, The thing that people are suggesting you measure is the back length, chest girth at that chest circumference, or the neck girth or neck circumference. Those are the three measurements. But there's so many more other measurements that come into play. And this is the wonderful thing about making your own dog wear, because you can actually take your own measurements and change the pattern before you get to sewing so that they fit. So those kind of measurements, they do not account for chest shape or how deep the chest is or that front drop, that brisket depth that I was talking about. Those kind of measurements are what really do start to kind of fine tune your patterns. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great week and have fun sewing for your dog, measuring your dog, and creating something that is absolutely perfectly fit to your dog. Have a wonderful week. See you later.